Welcome to the Green It Up Club. I'm Michael, and today we're talking about first aid treatment, the Green It Up Club style. So if you haven't noticed, I had a little traumatic injury to my eye, and it looks pretty bad and it feels even worse, but I had to do a video on it. I had to film myself going through this process because there are a lot of people that get injured and they're going about the healing process the wrong way. And I'm sorry if it grosses you out. It's grossing me out a little bit, and it's really hard to concentrate because my eyeball is just throbbing right now. But I had to make a video for you guys because I know that it's really scary when you get an injury and it looks pretty severe and you want to do things maybe the natural route. Maybe you don't want to do medications. Maybe you don't want to go with the traditional medical route and you want to go more alternative. So I'm going to share my experience with this injury with you to hopefully motivate you to do things naturally always, the Green It Up Club style. So let me explain what happened here. It looks like I got in a fight, and if you guessed that, you'd kind of be right if you said you got in a fight with a surfboard. Yep, I went out surfing today. The waves were kind of big shore break. Waves are crashing right on the sand, and I got in there, got some barrel. If you know anything about surfing, I was right in that tube, the wave tube, the barrel, and I got flipped over. My board hit me right in the eyeball. Now, immediately my vision blacked out in this eye, but I was kind of shaking it off. It kind of caught me off guard, and I noticed some blood, and I applied compression on it immediately. Just out of instinct. Your first instinct when you get an injury is to apply pressure because it hurts, and honestly, I thought my eyeball popped out. That's kind of what it felt like. It didn't even hit the bone, the eye socket, it just hit me straight in the eyeball, the point of the board. It freaked me out. My vision blacked out in this eye for a second. I got kind of my bell rung, a little bit of a concussion, but not severe. I immediately applied compression. So that's the first step. You want to apply compression. If it's bleeding, the compression is going to stop the blood flow or at least slow it down. Hopefully, even if it's a huge wound, hold on. I just want to make sure I'm not leaking. Okay, hold on. Sorry about that. I had to just go and take a break because I'm leaking a little bit. I'm really sorry if it grosses you out, but I wanted to do a video while it's still fresh and everything, and it's still fresh in my mind. It happened today, this afternoon. So luckily, I got hit in the eye. I hobble up the beach. The lifeguard, I was right in front of the lifeguard tower, and he wasn't even there. So don't always depend on the lifeguard or police or anybody to come save you. Luckily, the lifeguard was there eventually, but I went over to my friend on the beach. Nick, thanks for your help, buddy. So I go to Nick, I take my hand off of my eye, and he's like, oh damn, okay, let's go to the lifeguard. And I go to the lifeguard goes, oh damn, let me call in some backup. So eventually the senior lifeguard guy gets there. Terry, thanks for your help, buddy. You really took care of me. But the lifeguard applied first aid. Basically, he just put a little ointment in there to disinfect it and kind of stop the bleeding. And he gave me an ice compress to just put some ice on there. So let's talk about that. The lifeguard applied a little disinfectant, which is good. I was swimming around in the ocean, it might be disinfected. The best choice for disinfectants is always hydrogen peroxide. You don't want to use too many antibacterial creams and stuff like that. Typically, antibacterial ointments will kill bacteria, but it tends to kill the actual beneficial bacteria. And we see this problem a lot with antibiotics. Antibiotics tend to kill the weaker, actually beneficial microflora, which allows the bad, quote unquote, bad bacteria. There is no good or bad, there's only bacteria. But hopefully we'll get into that in some future videos. For now, hydrogen peroxide, that's the best. And cold compress actually slows down blood flow. So if you're bleeding or if you're swelling, which I have both, swelling and bleeding, it will slow down that blood flow and give the blood a chance to coagulate. to thicken up and scab over. Hopefully mine will stop bleeding. Okay, so somehow I gather up all my gear. I had a bunch of stuff with me. I was out kiteboarding and surfing, and I had all this stuff. Thanks to my good buddy Nick, I made it home safely, somewhat. And I was applying compression and ice the whole time, which is what you want to do. So I got home, I took a shower, washed all that salt water off. I put some hydrogen peroxide on that cut. And I noticed when I got home, the swelling had increased dramatically, even with the ice on there. So that's the first thing, is when you get a bad impact injury or cut, you might notice some swelling. If there's a bone, if you broke a bone or you did something internally, if you damage the structures internally, you'll have a lot of swelling. And if it's a broken bone, you'll probably know immediately because it'll go black and blue almost immediately after the injury. And I'll talk about broken bones in a future video, but for now, let's talk about cuts and swelling, because that's what I got right now. So first aid, compression, ice, and then I got back home, I cleaned it out. Now, if you don't have hydrogen peroxide, you can use some kind of natural soap. Don't use the antibacterial stuff because, again, antibiotics, antibacterial stuff. If you go to a hospital, the typical protocol is to prescribe antibiotics especially for a wound like this. By the way, all the lifeguards and even my friends wanted me to go to the hospital. Not necessarily because I needed stitches, because it really doesn't need stitches. And even if it did need stitches, I probably wouldn't go to the hospital. I would take another route with that. I could put some super glue in there. That works really good. I've done that. Even in third world countries when I'm traveling around, always carry some super glue with you if you have a big wound. As soon as that blood hits the super glue, it'll coagulate. It'll look really weird, but it'll stop the bleeding almost immediately. And you want to, if it's a big cut, you want to squish it together and compress it, and then either glue it, stitch it up, do whatever you have available with you. Now, I had a similar injury like this, but to my finger. I almost chopped my finger off in the Philippines. We were in the jungle, well, not the jungle, this little island with no hospital or anything, and I almost chopped my finger off with a machete trying to open a coconut. Cool story. But long story short, the locals they mashed up this little plant called the moringa plant. And in moringa, they call it malinga in Tagalog. In Tagalog, they call it malinga. And I found out it's moringa. Moringa is a great plant, and they have it growing there on the island wildly. So they crush it up, and it's fantastic for you. They put it in the cut. They jammed it in there and they packed it in, wrapped it up with electrical tape, and I was good to go. So use whatever's available to you. On that island, I didn't have any kind of bandages or anything available to me, but you can do this stuff naturally. I've been in these situations a lot, and people are like, oh, go to a hospital, go to a hospital. But what are they gonna do at a hospital? Stitch it up? Yeah. If it's a huge wound, yeah, stitch it up. The medical system is great for first aid treatment usually, but when they start prescribing antibiotics and pain meds, that's what all the lifeguards and everybody they were joking, because they were like, oh man, I'm jealous, you're gonna get some Vicodin. Yeah, have some Vicodin with a beer, you'll be good to go. No, I am not gonna take pain medication, not even a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory like, or a Tylenol or something, an aspirin, Motrin, Aleve. No, what's that gonna do? If you're bleeding, that's gonna actually thin your blood and you're gonna be bleeding more. So any anti-inflammatory, that swelling is a natural defense mechanism. It's swelling up, it's rushing fluid to the area, but it's also gonna clot. Hopefully, even if it's bleeding really profusely, if you apply compression to it, it's gonna stop the bleeding, and you can sew it up, you can stitch it up, you can staple it, you can glue it, whatever you got available to you. Pack some moringa in there. Now what I did, since I didn't need stitches, I put an eye patch over it, just a huge bandage, and taped it up until it stopped bleeding. And that was about an hour. Now, I'm letting it breathe a little bit because I want the blood to clot up and I don't want it to stick to the bandage. So I'm not gonna wear a bandage right now. And anyways, the bandage was kind of irritating and uncomfortable because it was pressing against my eyelashes. It was shoving my eyelashes into my eyeball. So if it's an eye injury, keep that in mind. Now, what I could do is I could have a Band-Aid going across here or up and down like this. But right now, I'm just gonna let it breathe because I want the blood to coagulate. Now, since the wound is still fresh, and what I had available to me, I have some raw honey. Raw honey is fantastic for wounds. People have been doing this. Human beings have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. They've been putting raw honey on there. Oop, leaking a little bit. Oh, sorry, I was leaking again. So right now I have raw honey on there, and that's gonna be a great disinfectant, but it has to be raw honey. You don't want the normal honey that you can find in most stores. You wanna get that raw organic honey because it's gonna have all those enzymes and natural antibiotic power in that raw honey. So raw honey is a good option. There are many other options that you have for natural disinfectants. I like raw honey. It's really easy. You can carry it around with you in your first aid kit in a little squeeze bottle. But raw honey is great, so I'm gonna have some raw honey on there. Let it breathe for a little bit, let the blood coagulate and hopefully scab over. If it was still bleeding profusely, I would compress it and approximate it, push those ends closer together and until it stops bleeding, and eventually you can take the compression away. That's what I was doing with the eye patch. I was compressing it. I put some ice on there to slow down the blood flow, which is gonna help the clotting. It's gonna help that blood clot up because if it's really swollen and blood is flowing out of there, it's gonna be bleeding a lot. So I put some cold compress on there and with the eye patch, and it stopped the bleeding, and now it's leaking a little bit, but mostly that's, I think, tears coming from my swollen eye. So what's the take-home message from this? If you have a wound, you can go to the hospital. I'm not saying don't go to the hospital, but I'm saying not all the typical conventional medical treatments are good for you. Pain relievers, or even very powerful pain relievers like Vicodin, those will actually hinder your body's healing process. And antibiotics will hinder your body's ability to heal as well. So there are natural options which you can treat yourself with. But just as a disclaimer, when in doubt, go to the damn emergency room because you don't want to be trying to fix yourself naturally and something terrible might happen. But if you have the little bumps and scrapes, try to do these things naturally and keep these things in mind. But always, always get checked out by a doctor. At least for me, I got checked out by the lifeguards. They said, look, you don't have a concussion, everything's fine. They did their first aid to me, and they recommended that I go get stitches, but I think it's not big enough. It's not a big enough wound. It's not still bleeding. If it's not bleeding profusely after about 20, 30 minutes, you know, well, okay, 20, 30 minutes of bleeding profusely is a lot. But if it's not gushing blood out, if you didn't hit a major artery, then you probably can handle it naturally. But always get checked out by either a doctor or maybe a paramedic or a lifeguard like I did. And they checked my spine out, they checked my face out, they wanted to make sure that I didn't fracture any bones around here, didn't get any concussion. So always get checked out by a doctor. You can go to your natural doctor, but if it's an emergency, go to the hospital and get checked out. Thanks for watching, guys. Again, I apologize for the grossness of this, but I thought it was a really cool opportunity to tell you guys how to handle things. And keep your cool. A lot of people freak out when they get injured, and just learn how to trust in your body, that your body can heal. We've been doing this for thousands of years, if not millions of years, depending on your philosophical look on life and humans. But just trust your body. Your body can heal even from very traumatic injuries. I'll do some follow-up videos to show you the healing process more as the days go by. Hopefully the swelling will go down tonight, and I'll keep applying some cold compresses. But right now I'm just probably gonna let it breathe, and I might not even need a bandage, but we'll see. All right, tune in next time, guys, for the follow-up video.